What's up, champs? This is, well, shit, I guess you know me as Nine Ball since that's what I've gone by for so long now. But that's kind of funny to me because in my mind, and I know some of you old schoolers agree with me here, the era that I most strongly associate with Myth is only a fraction of the game's actual lifespan by this point. You know, I'm talking about Bungie.net, 98 through 2001. That constitutes probably 80% of whatever mattered in Myth to me. That's just my personal opinion. But the 9ball account wasn't created until the tail end of that era, so most of what I actually cared about happened before I ever made it. It was supposed to be just another one of my dummies, but then I met up with the NC dudes and the rest is history. It's those guys, more than anything, that has kept me on this account and really, just playing the game as long as I did. You know, no homo. Well, okay, a little homo. What can I say? I'm only human after all. Nah, those are just some great guys. Sort of a dysfunctional internet family, which, come to think of it, I don't know if anyone outside of the core of us know the story behind its foundation. Now the story of a myth family who lost a lot and the one pothead who had no choice but to keep them all together. This is Name Changers Development. A dummy for Swedish Meatballs during their Cinderella run in Myth World Cup 2000, playing with Apollo and Zaramus. In 2003, Zar asked Appy and I to help him reform the Swedish Meatballs and secure the acquisition of the IC guys for our squad. Now back in 2001, Ankrik was trying to form a super team to replicate their 4th place finish from a previous year. We started recruiting a bunch of mercenaries and I tried to get my buddy Sky on the team. Well, it was a process, but that worked out better for Sky because he ended up teaming with the Iron Chef guys who kicked ass that year, while Ankrik imploded before the end of the QR. I contemplated jumping ship and asking to join IC along with Ska, but decided to stick it out with Ankrik. Well, you know, on that account at least. Afterwards, Pele brokered a partnership with Old Dirte and Tensac, you know, that old TFL clan? Well, guess who was on that team? None other than Ku, Seeker, and August. In fact, Augie was dummied and playing for us and the Iron Chefs. So, when all of us finally linked up in 2003, it felt like a long time coming. I created a hotline server for that team inspired by my time on Samstone Hotline, and since then at least some of us has talked on a variation of that chat room for a decade now, and there's still an IRC room used today. But back to the story at hand. The year is 2004 and Myth is experiencing a bit of a renaissance. You had old schoolers coming back, BMF, Wolfpack, some civil dudes running around, and not just the old guys, you had honest to goodness new players discovering the game. In fact, I bet some of you right now either discovered or just started to take the game serious around that time. It was the last year that registrations for the Myth World Cup actually went up compared to the previous year. You could sign on at any time of the day and find a game. I remember waking up early in the morning and playing with all the Japanese dudes. Myth was just percolating back then and has grown progressively more stagnant as time has gone on. But isn't that just the natural order of things? And yeah, you can bitch about the modern skills argument all you want, and I can disagree with you, but that's not why I'm here today. I'm here to showcase one of the most climactic 1v1 series in the history of Myth. I'm sure you all remember Cho versus Eric, even if a lot of the new faces here didn't actually play competitively with Eric or remember how good he was. Which again makes me feel like an old fucker because I still see Eric as the plucky upcomer challenging the M2 SBR cart. And if you don't know what M2 SBR is, you missed out, man. Anyways, despite that match's popularity, there is another gem of a match which I enjoyed far more but haven't heard anyone talk about. Considering there was only a few of us present to watch it, it's possible no one has ever seen these films until now. It happened early one morning during the aforementioned sunset of jump on any time and find a good game mythdom. It was the morning of Saturday, July 3rd, 2004, and I hopped onto Myth after a few bong rips to find Shaister settling into a heated duel against the most universally feared and hated player online, Chohan. In full disclosure, this was on match day during the middle of Myth World Cup 2004, and I was on both of their teams. I assumed everyone knew I was Cannibal Ox by now, but Eastwind was surprised when I got online the other day and called out some fanboy for wearing the BME tag, talking about how he didn't know shit about BME, and I've actually won money with those motherfuckers. So yeah, if you don't know, now you know. Oh, and check this shit out. I'm such a pack rat, I never delete anything, so I've got all these hard drives full of shit, right? And I went through some of the old Myth files looking for these films the other day I'm about to show you, and found this. Yo, I'm sorry, Grim, but I had to show it. Alright, and this is the last digression, I promise. But back on Playmyth at the time, the admins were turning over duplicate IPs, so it was a bad time to be a dummy. Well, someone posted on the Myth World Cup 2004 forums something to the effect of, "Gee, I sure am glad we don't have to worry about dummying anymore." And then I, about as subtle as a lawnmower, replied something like, Oh, really? Ho ho ho! Smiley face LOL. Signed 9 tilde. Hey guys, I'm cheating. Wink. Well, that stirred some shit up, and I made up an excuse about Cannibal Ox being my cousin. The truth of the matter was, I did have a cousin staying with me at the time, and he did try to play Myth on occasion. He was just really, really bad at it. So when the Myth posse had the pitchforks out and Grim was ready to throw down the banhammer, I came up with what I considered a flawless display of innocence. I would log into Myth from 2 different machines. Not original, I know, but this was back in 2004 when that sort of stuff wasn't as common. The machines were actually at opposite ends of my place at the time, so I had to pimp jog back and forth between the two and had a conversation like, "Hey Nine, they don't believe I'm real." "I know, man, isn't that ridiculous?" And then Magni and Chohan took me to a secluded corner of playmyth.net and worked on my legal defense. And let's just say lawyers they were not, though their enthusiasm was appreciated. Well, in the end, all of this sufficed for Grim to let me play on, so thank you, Grim. So here we are. We have Ankelamir as Shaister, a particularly fancy alias by his standards. August, Adam Bomb, myself, observing against the Ogre 1 and Ogre 2 of Myth, of course Chohan and Bullet-Tooth Tony. You know that this is a serious game when Adam Bomb gets shushed right here by Shaister. "Be quiet now," he says. And you got the brothers over there speaking Dutch. I point out that it is morning time and I am high on drugs. So just making that general announcement. It's not a pre-excuse, by the way, because I'm not playing this game. It's just more of a personality disorder more than anything. And keep in mind, guys, that this is a 1v1, so the individual unit handling isn't necessarily going to be there. There will be some dumb mistakes. I mean, that happens when you're controlling a lot of units, particularly on more units there are. It just takes a special kind of player to multitask like these guys can.
Flag captured.
And, kind of makes the regular guy feel a little better when he sees that, even
Flag
pros,
contested.
5-ballers like these two, fuck up occasionally. So, and I got a little melee engagement here in the middle. See who's gonna come out on top. Looks like Shaister's just kind of running in there, balls to the wall, without his balls, which Cho didn't have his either. He is able to pull out that melee win. So this is where I'd like to reflect for a minute and just say that Chohan, and trust me, I've played with plenty of great players. Guttermouth, Modem, Apollo, Predator, who's vastly underrated by the way. People forget, but he was a legit 5-baller back in 2000, and won Shogun, probably the biggest free-for-all tournament of all time. Of course, I've also played with Shaister, Dwarf, GKG was on our team one year, and I've been eliminated plenty of times by Tiri. But above them all, at his peak, Chohan was the best pure BC Slayer that I've ever seen play this game, and that's
Team
word.
eliminated.
And with that, Chohan jumps out to an early 1-0 lead, as Shaister assures Bullet-Tooth Tony that this is not a retirement match.
Game over.
Alright, and here we are into game 2. August found something better to do. And Sam Corbus decided to join up and watch this affair from the side of BME. And I really love this new feature in Myth 1.8 where you can zoom out so far. It's really quite nice. One feature I'd like to see implemented is if they, I don't know how hard this would be to program, but if you're the captain on a 2-team map, that you get the ability to zoom out as you can in replays. And they're the only ones who can do it, because it would kind of reinforce the role of the captain a little bit, which I think has been diminished over the years. It's come all the way from, in the early days, captains would take nothing, like Papa Scrub for BMF. He would take 0% sometimes, and really, as we've learned in modern Myth, if things has progressed, that really puts your team at a disadvantage. It's like you're playing 6-on-7, which, granted, in the early days, there was some merit to having a captain overseeing everything. But as everybody's learned and progressed in the game, we necessarily don't need a babysitter like that all the time. I mean, this is not to say that some of us couldn't benefit from one, but the needs don't necessarily outweigh the loss of the one player playing, at least in a tournament setting on high-level Myth. But with the added benefit of being able to zoom out, it could make a little bit of that difference up. It's amazing how, when you were younger, especially a map like this that's been out forever, I remember it seeming so massive, like when you were playing in low resolution way down here, and it just feels like it went on forever. But then when you zoom out, you get a real feel for how small a lot of these maps actually are.
Game on.
So, we see that Tony points out that Lance Armstrong is about to start his race. This was back in 2004. I think he had won like 7 in a row or something by this point. And as I point out here, I'm pretty sick of the guy. So we got both teams running middle. Chohan decides to eschew warriors for more dwarfs and pus. Where Shaister, he gets pus, but not as many dwarfs.
Flag
Actually,
captured.
not any dwarves, as it would seem, which I think is smart. I mean, you got enough shit to control in this game, especially once you start fucking flanking pus around like they do. There's too many units for 1v1 in this map. Yeah, I hope he falls and gets run over. I'm sick of Mr. Perfect, I see. So talking about the whole captain issue, something I think Tony doesn't get credit for, or Conan, if you guys remember, that's what he originally went by, Conan. People would make fun of him as a captain, and I played for the guy. He wasn't that bad, in all honesty, and it was nice because he was a legit 4-baller, right? Yeah, obviously he was in the shadow of his brother as we watch the pus come around the flanks here, and Chohan tried to control these dwarfs, which is just madness. Of course, Shaister is spaced out pretty well, so it's going to be hard for him. But anyhow, Tony, being such a good BC player that he is, he could take units when the time called for it. We see a better version of that today with GKG when he captains his teams. Not necessarily like Gore. Gore would captain in BC, extremely well, but that was just out of pure greed. That motherfucker just wanted to keep half the army for himself, so he teamed up with a bunch of guys that would let that happen, and he just did it. Whereas GKG, he's not necessarily, in Conan, not looking to take a huge chunk of the army, necessarily. But it's nice to have that BC ability in your captain, if and when you need it. But yeah, Conan was certainly a serviceable captain. Much more than I think people will give him credit for. But yeah, as we can see, it looks like Shaister has pulled it out. A much more reasonable trade. As Tony points out right here with his strategic mind, this is one shitty strat. So anyways, I'll speed this up,
eliminated.
And we will head into Game 3. Alright guys, and we're back into Game 3. Venice, we're tied up 1 game apiece. And I'll just use this opportunity to talk about my relationship with BME, since I told you guys my story with Swedish Meatballs Name Changers. So I got on with these guys pretty early on. In fact, back when they were just Order of Aurelius, if you remember that time, back when Conan was in fact Conan. It was Chohan, Conan, Magni, myself, Al Capone, who, funny story, switched over to Guru in 2004, and Shinko did the exact opposite. He switched from Swedish Meatballs to BME.
Game on.
So it was a funny little trade they did there, and I had to watch myself not to incriminate with anything I've said to them on one account. That wouldn't make sense if I brought it up on the other. It was a fun time. But another funny story about Shinko, as long as I brought it up, is he was fucking hated on that Swedish Meatballs team. The only reason he was on the team is because Zarmus wanted him, but the rest of the guys fucking hated him, especially Ku. And it got so bad to the point that he was like the fat kid in class. We would always make fun of him behind his back, and especially on the hotline server. And like, if you're being talked about a lot, you can eventually sense it, even if it's not out in the open. So he logs into the hotline server one day, literally as Ku was going on a rant about the guy, And his first word in the chat is talking shit, question mark. And Koo just laughs. We all bust out. And then he just signs off. The poor guy, I kind of felt bad for him. But yeah, so I joined on with him pretty early, and this may sound crazy now, and kind of pathetic actually, but in the early days of OA, Conan would vacillate between giving the biggest role to Chohan or myself. Like, I had ingratiated myself to that point with these guys. They knew I was some older vet. They just didn't know who. And I think they were like really receptive about welcoming that in at the time, and kind of my game awareness to balance out their pure BC ability. Now, of course, I continued to decline, and they continued their meteoric rise into the community. But back at this time, they were relatively unknown, if not, just scorned in the community a little bit. I mean, everybody hated them. They were just so picked on, which I couldn't imagine today, somebody who's so good being so reviled, especially early on. I mean, eventually they kind of won some respect over, but yeah, then they combined with LOA, Legion of the Avatara, at least the best players from each group. I mean, we jettisoned some of them off, like Al Capone and fucking Enigman. He wasn't given an invite. And they were both interesting clans in that they were similar because by their leaders. You had Chohan, an extremely strong player, leading OA, and then you had Dwarf, who was also very strong, leading his group of players. And most of these players were Northern European. Of course, Dwarf was Canadian and myself from the States, but primarily Norwegian, Dutch players. And it was a pretty good fit, as we see Chohan here involved elsewhere on the map, losing some of his pus pretty badly, unfortunately. That's 1v1 for you. But yeah, we had some intense matches between OA and LOA back in the day. Like, people don't realize it now. And it was quite the unlikely marriage, despite what I just said earlier about them, making sense and seeming like a natural fit. It's kind of like we went to the same high school, so because we were kind of similar in the times we played and the people involved. Like Magni had a brother on LOA, for instance. But yeah, we actually hated each other for a while, and we had some really intense, like, old school clan matches, if anybody remembers them. Not playing in a tournament, just clan matches on online, and some good times. So we see Shaister lose a pus right there. Also, maybe multitasking a little too much. Percents are about even right now. Plenty of time left to go, though. Maybe too much time. It's not really Elmoth at this point. It's BC. But, that's the way it goes. So we're going to see Chohan kind of chase Shai around the map, trying to force an engagement. Eventually that will happen. Also just want to point out that I respect the hell out of Dwarf for playing for shitty teams for so long. But yeah, I had a lot of great times with BME. And like I said, I don't think a lot of people realize how close I was to them from the early days. And I kind of stepped to the side a little bit with BME just because we had so many great players. Like Loyal, however the fuck you pronounce that guy's name, from LOA, he was a 5-baller in that tournament, 2004. He was nice, as was Dwarf and Chohan and Conan, and that was a stacked team, man. I've played on a lot, just like I've played with a lot of good players. I played with a lot of really good teams, and I'm not going to say BME was the best, but they were fucking strong. I'll say this, no offense to the name changers, but that 2004 BME team was better than any of the incarnations of name changers. Though I had a lot more fun with name changers, a lot closer to those guys, but I was pretty close to BME, and we did actually start a Halo clan after we stopped playing Myth. And believe it or not, Chohan is actually quite pro in Halo, much like Myth. So yeah, little known side to BME. And another thing I'll point out is Shaister is one of the few players that I actually seen Cho respect. Like Tiri, for instance. No offense to Tiri, but Chohan did not respect him in the slightest. Which, I mean, when they played each other, Chohan generally got the best of him. You can blame it on one thing or the other, but that's just the way it is. I also noticed in that Chohan was much similar to Tiri our Drizzt Poop, as I like to call him, in that he had a big target on his back, you know, for being known as, you know, potentially the best, the GOAT. So people wanted to step up and try to take that title. And dueling was a big thing back in these days in 2004. And you always had constant 1v1 challenges in the lobby thrown down to these good players. And it was a no-win situation because if Chohan won, then, you know, big deal. He was supposed to win. Same thing with Tiri. If you win, you know, you're supposed to. But if you lose, holy shit, it's a giant fucking deal. Even though you might have played 10 1v1 matches and this was just some random game, that motherfucker's gonna go in the lobby and brag about it like he just won the Super Bowl because he beat, you know, this big fucking myth hero. And I saw the pressure of that really get to Tiri. Like, I seen him like kind of flake out on the forums a little bit over the whole thing. But Chohan never blinked. Like, he just embraced the challenge. He just took it on, and I respected that about him. So anyways, we see that Shaister's getting pushed around a little bit at this point, and I'm just going to go in and speed it up because I think we can go ahead and see what's happening. Let's see, you know, let's see how it's no foregone conclusion. That's still Shaister controlling these units. And keep in mind, as we're watching all these players dance around, that these are both controlled by, you know, one-man teams here. Some pretty good multitasking going on for the most part. Got the cheeky hill right there by Chohan.
Team eliminated.
And there we are. So now we have Chohan out to the lead, 2-1. So Shaister has to win this next one, or he's eliminated. Alright guys, welcome back. We have Chohan with the 2-1 lead over Shaister entering game 4, which will be Spiderweb, Elmoth. So yeah, I just want to point out that even though I said the OA guys were relatively unknown, at least in terms of being a force in the community at the time when I first teamed up with them, early 2003, pretty early on, I don't want it to sound like they were completely new to Myth, of course. Chohan had been around. I actually recall, you know, talking about another great 1v1 series, at least for the circumstances, was when Undead, which if anybody remembers him, he is Rattlesnake's younger brother, Rattlesnake of GTM fame. He started talking a lot of shit to Civil, and Odin got home from the bar drunk one night and happened to see the post on the forum and, you know, threw down a gauntlet, jumped right on the Myth, and found Undead and called him out, and they played right then and there, and Odin just fucking took his lunch money, just beat him down handily, to the point that Undead rage quit. And one of the observers at the time on Undead's team was a noob Chohan, who took over and actually beat Odin
captured
in that particular game, which was quite impressive considering Odin's status in the community at the time. So here we see that Chohan could deny Shai the hill completely. I mean, look at his fetch way back here. He's in quite the vulnerable position. But look how much honor Cho has. I mean, he backs off and gives Shaister complete reign of the hill. Not just lets him on, but lets him get the best position right in the middle. And he's kind of jammed up over here on the side. So, hell of a guy. For someone that's so hated, and, you know, everybody talks so much shit about, at least at the time, he's actually a pretty nice guy once you get to know him. That old cliche. So now we see the showdown between the two. Yeah, so I just want to point out that Cho was very skilled very early. Even though he wasn't exposed to the community, I mean, for him to just step in and beat down Odin in a 1v1 when Odin was on a roll, knocking down Undead, that was pretty impressive. And I remember that early on. I took note of him ever since then. So yeah, like I said, we do see that Shaister has Chohan a little pinned up here in the side. I'm going to go ahead and speed it up. And we see that Chohan just tries a rush. He doesn't want to wait. Which, I mean, he kind of had to rush because he had given Shaister the middle of the hill, so it's Elmoth. So a lot of action going on here, but we can see that it is generally falling Shaister's way.
Contested.
Oh, but a big dwarf shot by Chohan, which briefly brought the percentages a little bit closer. Alas, it will be in vain, as we can see that Shaister has the better melee with the Zerk, more souls, and that pretty much does
eliminated.
So with that, we are tied up 2 games apiece, heading into the final and deciding Game 5. And here we are, guys. This is the final countdown. We are in Game 5. Of course, the epic showdown between Chohan and Shaister. They're going to finish it out with Grave Elmoth. So, same map, different unit set. And you can see that they're fairly close to each other. If you can recall, Chohan gave Shai the access to the hill in the last game, and Shai is at a start that traditionally is going to get up the hill faster, so we can see what happens when the roles are reversed here shortly. Also interesting to note, the 2 J-men trade for Chohan, taking a little bit of a risk there. Less archers, and it's actually being pointed out to him by Corbus. He's asking him, why did you not get more archers, which is such a critical unit on this map. You can see that Shaister actually opts for a little bit more melee and a full complement of archers. So he's got some Thrall in lieu of that second J-man and more archers. And then Chohan with quite the response. That would even the odds. So he's like intentionally handicapping himself. But as we can see here, if I just want to freeze it real quick, Chohan, who was so reviled at the time for being such a bad guy, let Shaister up on the hill when he did not have to. Whereas when the roles are reversed, the wholesome, silent and great player and such a nice guy Shaister is flanking his puss right around from the beginning, pushing his archers. He has no fucks to give. He is going to take it right to Chohan.
Flag
so
captured.
We're going to see an epic showdown right here for the last map. Chohan, as always, pushing. He's an aggressive son of a bitch, and that's what I like about him. It's not just that he's good, his playstyle is entertaining. He's got cojones. Yeah, it might not actually mean anything on paper, but it's something I can respect for sure. Other great all-time big cojones players. I played with a few of the great ones. Odin is right there on that list. We were talking about him earlier. Also Apollo and Head. Head is one of the best all-time no fucks to give players that just always pressing, even if he's outnumbered and fighting uphill. He just does not care. So you can see this is quite the juicy battle. Chohan loses his dwarf, but Shaister still has his. Chohan seems to be winning the melee fight, at least in the fact that he has the warriors, so they are called quite damaged. Yeah, not the case. Though he does have the J-men, who are coming in quite handy with all these Thrall of Shaister. So we can see that Shaister is flanking around with that gold, though it doesn't have any pus. Trying to get this dwarf who is badly injured. You see a couple of that warrior fell down. Shaister smartly targeting him with his archers. But now we have the J-man coming over.
Flag contested.
He was quite hurt at this point, but there is a full life warrior, and oh! What a play. Shaister takes out both those players really quick, and then he tries to do the archer melee on this J-man right here, while Chohan sends a volley of arrows across, and there we have it, folks. All the melee, with the exception of this little goal right here, are down. We've got 3 archers for Cho, one of them hurt, against 4 archers for Shai, also one of them hurt. So let's see how this plays out. You've got these guys controlling each of the archers independently in a lot of cases, and you see that Chohan's selection of less archers to begin with is coming into play right here, with Shaister having an extra one over him. So really comes down to the wire right here. I'm just going to step back and let you guys enjoy it.
escape from. There's a war going on outside, no man escape from. There's a war going on outside, no man escape from. There's a war going on outside, no man escape from. No man escape from. There's a war going on outside, no man escape from. There's a war going on outside, no man escape from. There's a war going on outside, no man escape from.
War is a continuation of politics by other means. The purpose of war is to serve a political end, but the true nature of war is to serve itself.
Team eliminated. Game over.
Karma's a double-edged sword. Karma's a double-edged sword. Karma's a double-edged sword. Karma's a double-edged sword.
What do I really want in this stage of my life? I'd like a beautiful shorty that'll praise me right. I'll praise her back though. I'm not a selfish bastard, struggle with big shit, but got this elf shit master. Times is strange. I claim to be the man, like I know God and understand his ingenious plan. But I'm just a simple Joe, living low, avoiding conflict, cooking food for stereo, so feed your CD-ROM this. Sure, I've struggled, spent days in mud puddles. Shut up, shit talkers, and made wanna be thugs buckle. The world ain't all honeysuckles and violets. When smoke from the fire lips, protect your iris. Shit's hard, especially hits the scarlet soul. That's why niggas drink and stress for cigars to roll. It's like the farther we go, we cover less than stands. Life's a freak that'll fuck you, and all that you want is this dance. Cause we really fragile, but think we tough. Get bold in the heat of the battle, but then we get cut. Butts back on the seat of the saddle with our heads down. Missing the meal when God multiplies the spread down. You know I come to the fork in the world so many times, but I just keep choosing wrong. Choosing wrong.